good luck. Right, now, the Prime Minister probably hoped that today's agenda would be focused on reforms for the National Health Service. But instead, it has been overshadowed by a growing row with the world's richest man, Elon Musk, over calls for a national investigation into grooming gangs in the UK. Well, this morning, Sir Keir Starmer was forced to defend his record on tackling child sexual abuse while he was Director of Public Prosecutions. Here's what he told our political editor, Beth Rigby.
On Elon Musk, I do need to ask you this. He called your safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips, an evil witch, a rape genocide apologist who should be put in jail. Does that sort of abuse of a minister make you feel angry? And what is your response to that? Thank you.
Child sexual exploitation is utterly sickening, utterly sickening. And for many, many years, too many victims have been completely let down by perverse ideas about community relations, or by the idea that institutions must be protected above all else. And they've not been listened to and they've not been heard. And when I was Chief Prosecutor for 5 years, I tackled that head on because I could see what was happening. And that's why I reopened cases that had been closed and supposedly finished. I brought the first major prosecution of an Asian grooming gang. In the particular case, it was in Rochdale, but it was the first of its kind. There were many that then followed that format. I changed the whole prosecution approach because I wanted to challenge and did challenge the myths and stereotypes that were stopping those victims being heard. So we changed the entire approach, not without criticism at the time, I might add. And when I left office, we had the highest number of child sexual abuse cases being prosecuted on record. Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote. And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, not protecting victims. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career.
Let's bring in our Home Editor, Jason Farrell, who's been investigating grooming gangs for a number of years now. And Jason, it's interesting, the Prime Minister saying he chose to speak out today because of Elon Musk's comments. It's about truth and calling this stuff out. His point being that Elon Musk is spreading misinformation about something where there has been a response. It may not have been perfect in the early stages, but there have been a number of reports into grooming gangs and convictions as well.
Yeah, there's a few things that he's responding to. He's responding to personal attacks against him and some of the members of his government.
Yeah, Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips, yeah.
Indeed. But the wider thing that he is actually responding to is this calls now, which has not just come from Elon Musk, but also from the leader of the opposition. And we heard it again in the Commons today from the Shadow Home Secretary saying there needs to be a national inquiry. You're not doing enough. You're not getting onto this. The point is that there have obviously been inquiries, and this is one of the things that he's making the point. We've had the Operation Span was the most recent one, actually looking into events in Rochdale between 2004 and the 8 years subsequent up to 2012. There's been the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which is a wider inquiry looking at sexual abuse generally, but had a section on grooming gangs. There was probably the most revealing inquiry of all was 10 years ago, now in Rotherham, the Alexis J report there, which really kind of opened people's eyes to the major concerns around this. So the point is he's saying there have been these various investigations into this. And, you know, we have gone around the country over the years and looked at towns and cities where this has happened and spoken to victims. And I suppose the question he's addressing, and it's a question now for everyone really, is has enough been learned? What has been learned and what hasn't been learned?
In recent years, we've spoken to alleged victims of grooming across the country,
In 2020, this woman in Yorkshire told us how her abuse had continued from childhood into adulthood.
They raped me first, and then they said to me, stop speaking to the police, don't speak to the police, why are you doing that?
In Hull, our investigation into several victims of a predominantly Asian grooming gang led to Humberside Police reopening the investigation.
That room, that flat, took my childhood from me. I think I was raped by around 150 men over the 3-year period.
In Glasgow, we met victim Tony Louise, who says she was abused from the age of 12.
When I went to the police, one of the police officers turned around to me and went, "You've got a very active imagination for a wee girl, haven't you?"
In more than a dozen regions where we explored the problem, a common theme was inaction and a failure to prosecute. Marlon, who we first interviewed 2 years ago when his daughter Scarlett was still going missing, says he was dissatisfied today with the Prime Minister's response.
I found it as an opportunity for him to have a go at other political parties. I don't care about other political parties. What I care about is children being groomed. Obviously, I've gone through that with my daughter, but this is continuing.
There have been successful prosecutions, such as this gang in Rochdale, and local public inquiries into grooming gangs in Telford, Rotherham and Greater Manchester.
The lessons from our past have been well and truly learned.
There was a national review into child abuse under Alexis Jay, but its section on grooming gangs was limited to 6 locations, mostly not known for having a problem. And Jay expressed frustration her recommendations hadn't been implemented. Today, the Home Secretary said that would change.
First, I can confirm we will make it mandatory to report abuse. Second, we'll also legislate to make grooming an aggravating factor in the sentencing of child sexual offences, because the punishment must fit the terrible crime.
The opposition echoed Elon Musk's call for a national inquiry.
Will the Home Secretary commission that national statutory public inquiry which can compel witnesses to attend, that can requisition evidence and where it can take evidence under oath?
The government says it's focused on improving police inquiries, and lawyer David Greenwood says they still aren't properly recording information about offenders.
I'm not convinced that the police forces and local authorities have gathered the necessary data. So I just don't think the data is there. Police should be working out who these groups are more actively and identifying them and using their powers to disrupt them.
Marlon, here with daughter Scarlett, is also calling for a national public inquiry. Arguably, there is more to learn, but it's also the case that there's plenty still to action. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in former Detective Constable with Greater Manchester Police, Maggie Oliver, who joins us now. She helped to uncover and blow the whistle on widespread abuse in Rochdale. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the programme. Are you in favour of a national public inquiry?
Good evening. I've worked with Jason on many cases now, including all but one of those that you've just highlighted, and you've done some amazing work. Jason quite rightly says that we have had a national abuse inquiry, which I was heavily involved in. And initially I put great faith in it because it was being chaired by Alexis Jay. Unfortunately, the grooming gang section of that national abuse inquiry was painfully inadequate. It was a 10-day hearing, which was meant to look at a national scandal going back decades. One victim was allowed to give evidence. All the core participants, including myself, were denied an opportunity to speak. It was a platform for senior police officers and social workers to say what a great job they were doing. I find Keir Starmer's comments today that people who dare to say that we've still not got a grip of this crime are far-right extremists, because I am not, and the victims are not, and there is complete and utter outrage and fury that has been said. So the question isn't, do we need another national abuse inquiry? The question is, who would lead it? What would it look at? Who would be the contributors? Would it be particularly and mostly driven by victims and survivors and by experts who do not have an axe to grind? David Greenwood, that you just spoke to there, He was another core participant on ICSA, and we were all horrified that it did not deliver what we had hoped it would. And when you think that the Lord Janner inquiry got 3 weeks about one abuser, Lambeth Council got 5 weeks, a national problem that we have had for decades didn't touch on any of the areas where these gangs operate. Rochdale, Rotherham, Huddersfield, Telford, Oxford, not one was included. And the question always has to be why. The final thing I'd like to say is that as the Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer was in charge when I worked on that Rochdale case, which was lauded as a fantastic result for British justice. I would remind him that 10 years later, the new Chief Constable of Greater Manchester said that that case was borderline incompetent. I knew the victims on that case, and I resigned because of the failures that they were subjected to, including the decision to charge a 40-odd-year-old man who got a young 13-year-old with special needs pregnant. We had a fetus, we had DNA, and Keir Starmer, together with the Chief Crown Prosecutor, decided to even charge that man with sexual activity with a child and not rape. So I would counter the fact that that was a great job.
OK, Maggie, well, so Keir Starmer, we have played out what he said today. He can't respond to those individual comments that you've made there, but I'm going to bring in Jason here because Maggie makes a really good point in terms of, as you have also said, there has already been a national inquiry of sorts into child sexual abuse. There have been a number of reports, investigations into Rotherham, Telford, Cornwall, Rochdale, Derbyshire, Bristol. Reports have been done. The scale of the problem is known about. Recommendations have been made. But it's about implementation. That's the bigger question now, is whether anything has been learnt and whether anything is being done to prevent it happening again.
Well, there's a lot to unpick there. I mean, I think the points that Maggie made are important, and we did on Sky News point them out at the time about the limitations of what the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse was doing, because they were looking at towns like St Helens, Warwickshire, Bristol, not, as Maggie says, kind of the Telfords, the Rochdales, the Rotherhams, where this was actually happening. And they did give it very little time. They didn't give it the time that they gave to other subjects. And they did very much focus on the officials, and they said that they were kind of trying to stress test the way in which these officials would deal with issues. I don't think that's really what the victims wanted. I think they wanted victims' voices heard to explain the problems that they'd had with the council, with the police, with social services, and the way that their investigations were dealt with, the kind of things that Maggie was raising when she blew the whistle in Rochdale. So there is a question about, you know, have the lessons been learned? That's certainly the first thing. But implementation, you know, is also a massive resourcing issue. And I think this is perhaps one of the elephants in the room, that whenever I come across a case of child sexual exploitation and a group of young women who are trying to raise the issue, there simply doesn't seem to be the resources supplied to investigate to the level in which that would be needed. And people talk about, and we've heard before discussions of, you know, it needs to be treated like terrorism. Can you really kind of, you know, 24-hour round-the-clock have surveillance on a chip shop, for example? So it takes and requires an awful lot of resources to be able to achieve what's needed in some of these cases, and that is a problem.
Jason, thank you, Maggie. And we're running out of time, but I'm keen to come back to you to ask you, this is back in the headlines by quite an extraordinary turn of events. You know, Elon Musk getting involved online has brought it back into the headlines. And while it's here, and I know that you want it to stay here, so many people do, what do you want to happen from this point forward? How can we seize on this moment? Talking about grooming gangs, what needs to be done better?
I think the first point, as Jason said, is to implement the recommendations that came out of ICSA. That's the basic thing to do. And also then to I think we should be gathering data. And I think we should take the politics out of this issue and allow victims and survivors to be heard. They want a national spotlight on this problem. And, you know, as Jason has quite rightly said, this is like, there are many layers to this, resourcing problems, problems with the courts, with the prisons. I would like to see somebody join in this conversation who will look after the victims whose cases never get to court. Because when we have less than 2 in 100 cases that ever reach trial, that is 98 victims in every 100 who are just abandoned without any kind of help or support or counselling. Their lives are ruined. And we at the Maggie Oliver Foundation, we're trying to help them pick up the pieces of broken lives. We need to get a grip. We need to stop it so that we don't have new generations having to suffer the same trauma that lasts a lifetime, as Jason well knows.
Yeah, Maggie, thank you so much for your time tonight. Maggie Oliver there, one of the first police whistleblowers when it came to grooming gangs, and Jason Farrell, our home editor, who's been investigating the story for a number of years. And thank you so much for your insights. Thank you. As still to come on the programme, the Prime Minister unveils his plans to tackle NHS waiting lists. We'll have the details on that. Also ahead, Tuchel time, the England manager gets to know his new surroundings in his first day at St George's Park. And if you ever fancy living the billionaire lifestyle, well, now you might just have your chance with a jet-set stay in Bristol.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes. Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
The Prime Minister has rejected suggestions his plans to improve the NHS would see privatisation by stealth. Sir Keir Starmer set out today how he hopes to slash waiting times to 18 weeks over the next 5 years with a new private healthcare partnership. The government is also planning to deliver 2 million extra appointments by the end of next year, with greater access to community diagnostic centres. Sky's health correspondent Ashish Joshi has the details.
I'm going to check your blood pressure and your weight, and hopefully we can do a CT chest scan.
Martina McInhill is a lifelong smoker, or rather, she was. She packed up cigarettes just before Christmas. As she's in the high-risk group, Martina has been asked to come to her local community diagnostic centre for a CT scan to check for lung cancer.
I think it's a good thing, actually. It takes away from the hospital, and, you know, it's better here, really. You're more connected with the people that are trying to help you.
So when the machine tells you to take a deep breath in as much as you can.
This might look and feel like a hospital, but this Community Diagnostic Centre, or CDC, is in a shopping mall on a high street in North London.
It's going to be a sharp scratch now.
Bringing care to the heart of the community is a key part of the government's elective reform plan to bring down waiting lists. It aims to create millions of appointments by building capacity in the system through more CDCs, extra surgical hubs, and using the private healthcare sector.
Here we offer several tests, X-ray, ultrasound, CT, MRI, ophthalmology tests, and also phlebotomy.
This centre is now open for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and soon it will be 7 days.
A lot of patients have a preconceived notion about attending hospitals. There's a lot of fear, and bringing this into a shopping mall, into an environment that is familiar to them, makes it a lot easier for them to access healthcare.
There are 165 of these diagnostic centres across the country. And by extending their opening hours, the government thinks it can create an extra 500,000 appointments. Having community diagnostic centres like this at the heart of the community on a high street or a shopping centre will be absolutely crucial in helping the government to deliver its elective targets. But while you have centres like this which are open for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's great for patients. But where will the workforce come from? And this is the question being asked by the Royal Colleges.
We need to invest in our workforce as well to get the plan to work and be effective. But as well as the workforce, it's more having the right, kind of resources, whether it's our estates, whether it's having the IT infrastructure.
The ambition is certainly bold, but everyone, patients and staff, will want the government's NHS plans to work. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in central London.
Still to come on the UK tonight, a warning over the safety of baby slings after the death of a 7-week-old little boy. I'll be speaking to the parents of Jimmy Alderton next. Welcome back. Now, a coroner has issued a warning about the potential dangers of baby slings. This is after the death of a 7-week-old baby boy. James Alderman, known as Jimmy, was being breastfed in the baby carrier worn by his mum. An inquest into his death heard that Jimmy had ended up in an unsafe position too far down the sling, and he collapsed, tragically dying 3 days later. Well, the coroner has warned that there's just not enough information available for parents on the risks of slings and said action has to be taken to prevent future deaths. Jimmy's parents are now calling for a set of industry safety standards for baby carriers. I'm joined in the studio now by Jimmy's dad, George, who works with us here at Sky News, and his wife, Ellie. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
George, you wrote about this online and you've decided to speak about this because this is something that all parents watching tonight will be familiar with. You have a new baby and you get all the kit, and part of that kit nowadays, because you're told to keep your baby close, to build the bond, is a baby sling.
Yeah.
And this seems like just part of the ordinary kit, but the argument you've got is that it doesn't come with instructions, proper instructions.
Yeah, so essentially they do come with instructions, but there's different instructions for different types of baby slings, lots of different types of baby carriers that are out on the market. And some of the instructions, I think, are focused a bit too much in terms of them being too tight, whereas what happened with Jimmy and what came out of the inquest was that the sling was too loose, and there's not enough awareness, we think, and the coroner thinks, of slumping. So the baby being too loose in it and slumping down, and not necessarily having anything over their face, but being in a position where they can't get enough oxygen into their lungs. And yeah, that's why we're now trying and promote this as something that people need to be aware of, and why the coroner in the inquest wrote a prevention of future deaths report.
Yeah. It's really brave of you to take this on in Jimmy's name, because it's the worst possible thing that can happen. You know, Ellie, you're meant to be keeping your baby close and safe, but I know, as you've said before, George, you know, he was close, but he wasn't safe, and you just didn't know. And this was a sling that you'd used before with your older child, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I purchased it from a sling consultant for my older child when he was a baby, but he was then 2 years old when we had Jimmy. So I kind of went on sort of the knowledge that I'd built prior with my previous child, but obviously, like, you sort of forget everything you've learned, so, like, you don't retain everything. And yes, the carrier was kind of marketed as being suitable for feeding, hands-free, and suitable for newborns. So I did sort of feel like it didn't feel quite right, but, like, I just thought, well, who am I to know? Like, I'm following the instructions, this is how it fits, like...
Well, you
so I wish I
trusted my own... Suitable for age.
Yeah.
You know, you were wearing it. Again, wearing slings, you know, all mums will say, am I wearing it right? Am I wearing it right?
Yeah.
You know, there's no hard and fast instructions. There's no industry standard. Can you tell me about that day, if you wouldn't mind? Because you'll be doing something that all mums will be doing. You were getting ready to go out. You just needed 5 minutes, hands-free.
Yeah.
Jimmy needed to be fed, so you were feeding him as you moved about the house.
Yeah, so when we say hands-free, like I did sort of when I was feeding Jimmy in it, I did sort of have my hand...
Yeah, it's just a bit of extra support because your arm's hurt, right?
He was still kind of within the carrier, as it were. And I think one of the main points that came out of the inquest is that there is a guidance called TICS, which is known about but not widely enough, which is an acronym which is for having your baby tight and high. So tight in view, close enough to kiss and supported back. But the issue that arose in the inquest was that actually if you try and feed a baby in a carrier, and particularly under 4 months, if they're low birth weight as well, or have any vulnerabilities in particular, it is pretty much impossible to be able to breastfeed in a carrier and meet that TICS guidance, which is promoted as the safe way to wear a baby. So it seems very confusing for parents. I mean, one thing I would say, I'm not against baby wearing in any way. Like, I think it's a really useful tool, especially in this modern world. But I would just like to see and call for like mums to please like go to a baby wearing consultant, like please use them, because they have all the knowledge and expertise to be able to make sure that mums do have a safe fit. And I think that's where sort of the knowledge and the education needs to improve.
That's expert knowledge, isn't it? But George, as you know, we all know not all parents have that resource available to them. And I just want to know if you want there to be an industry standard for baby carriers, for there to be clear information, a standard model of baby sling, because again, parents have been there trying every different one. Is it comfortable? What does it do? All the advertising says breathable fabrics, you know, the different designs. But, you know, there are product safety laws, but it seems that baby slings just sort of fall through the cracks a little bit. There doesn't seem to be a standard practice, a standard model.
Yeah, they do. And essentially what happened with the car seat industry was because so many, sadly, children and babies were dying in car seats, the research was done and a standardised model was set up to make sure that they go through these stringent tests to prevent babies dying in car seats. At the moment, there's nothing in place for baby slings because a lot of them are very different. But also as well, there's no sort of standardised sort of set, which I find really strange to think of because they are so widely used.
Because they're on the rise. You see so many parents, mums and dads, wearing them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, definitely what needs to happen as far as we're concerned is for them to, for all of the different companies to come together. This isn't about sort of blaming one particular company or anything like that, but for everyone involved in that industry to come together with a simple set of rules and something a bit like when you leave hospital with your baby, you're given leaflets on safe sleeping and things like that, but nothing on baby carriers. You'll have to work it out for yourself. There has to be something where there's a hard and fast set of rules that are simple to understand for parents that should just go with every single sling that's out there. And I can't understand why that's not in place already. I know work is being done now to do it.
It needs to happen faster.
But it needs to happen, like, Jimmy's died. It's too late for us. And it could be too late already for some other parents that we don't know about yet. And that's the scary thing. And that's why the coroner has written this report, because she literally thinks more babies will die unless something changes.
And the coroner has sent that report to NHS England, the Department of Health and Social Care, the company responsible for the baby sling and the Office for Product Safety and Standards. And the hope is that, you know, getting the NHS educated, midwives, you know, having that specialist knowledge imparted to everyone, that it can keep babies safe by giving their parents the proper knowledge. I know you're expecting again, Ellie. Baby number 3 on the way. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I just want to know how the both of you are remembering Jimmy, because you're doing something so good in his name by raising awareness and making sure that no parents have to go through this. You want people to be educated to keep their families safe. But how do you remember Jimmy? The pictures are gorgeous, just 7 weeks old. What a delight.
He was like such a gentle, sort of docile character. And so I really remember that about him. Compared to our older one, he was a lot more vocal and a lot more, just a different character, really. But Jimmy was just...
He was always very quiet. It was always... it was always like people almost forgot that he was around, not in sort of a horrible way, but, you know, Arthur was sort of... Our other son was running around, running amok, and little Jimmy was sort of sitting there. He loved having, like, cuddles, so that's why we've set up our own sort of fundraising initiative called Jimmy's Cuddle. Because literally I used to just pick him up, put him on my tummy and he'd just fall asleep. So he loved his cuddles and that's why through raising the awareness and also the fundraising we've been doing for various charities, including St George's Hospital Charity, Momentum Children's Charity, and we're hoping to do more in the future for Shooting Star and the Lullaby Trust, all in Jimmy's memory so that his life lives on.
Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing Jimmy's stories. And good luck for the future. And I really hope that everything goes well for the new baby and also with the work that you're doing, but take some time off to relax.
I'm trying my best.
George, Ellie, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come after the break, we'll have the sports news for you.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the net?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank.
These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them. A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again.
This is the third or fourth time in 18 months that their homes have gone under.
Sky News, the full story first. It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology.
This elite engineering, designed to humour and to help us.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Coming up, we'll be telling you what it's like to live the billionaire lifestyle in Bristol. That is on the way. But first, Dave is here with the sport. Thomas Tuchel spending his first day at St George's Park after taking over as England coach, which seems like ages ago now.
Yeah.
But it's his first day at St George's Park. What's his first task?
Well, you're right, it was a long time. He was appointed back in October and he was criticised for not going to those Nations League games in November, but he is now officially in situ. January the 1st, he was officially England manager. First task, probably getting TT on his tracksuit, getting measured up for the suit, wondering if he's going to have the waistcoat look of Gareth Southgate or maybe his traditional cap. We'll see. He's been watching a lot of players, in truth. He went to Anfield yesterday, he did the Spurs game at the weekend and the Arsenal game, and he's at Molineux tonight, so he's watching a lot of players.
Busy man. A big question, when's he going to announce his first squad selection? That's what we want to know.
We've still got a couple of months till his first game, March. World Cup qualifiers, Albania on March the 21st, and then 3 days later against Latvia. So he's still got a lot of time. A few injury concerns with the likes of Bukayo Saka might be fit then. So, yeah, he's got a lot of players to watch, and it won't be for a while, but at least he's there. He's actually at Molineux tonight, and perhaps he'll be watching Morgan Gibbs-White.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I can remember standing in the paddock at the Victoria Ground. One of the coaches said, "You had an exceptional tournament there. People are starting to notice you now." And I came away from that evening, I was buzzing.
This is Rich Wilkinson, 16 years old, living the dream at Stoke City. Like so many others, he was released, but Rich took a different path. He trained as a therapist to counsel people with shared experiences.
Are you saying that for you back then, your entire status and feeling of self-worth?
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, if you've ever wondered what a billionaire's lavish lifestyle is like, now is your chance to find out. A private jet that was once apparently owned by notorious drug kingpin Pablo Escobar is now available to rent, although it's firmly grounded. The Boeing 727 was bought and renovated by businessman Johnny Palmer and is now sitting on an industrial estate in Bristol. And I'm pleased to say that Johnny joins me now to tell us all about it. Where on earth did you find such a thing?
Well, up the road in a place called Kemble, there's an old aircraft graveyard where they land these things and sell off the expensive bits, and the fuselages are left behind available for people like me to buy.
And you've turned it into a rental and you've dressed it all up. I think we can show some pictures. It does look extremely lavish. And it's said to be once owned by Pablo Escobar. How did you trace that connection?
Well, this is a funny thing. I didn't. There's these people online that research tail numbers and flight logs and company registrations offshore, and I got a message from one of them suggesting that it might have been Pablo Escobar's. That seems to have subsequently gone viral all over the planet, and everyone has said that it is now Pablo Escobar's plane.
Well, it certainly piqued our interest, which is why we got you on. And because did you do a little bit of research yourself? Because I'm looking at it and I can imagine Pablo Escobar in there. It looks pretty lavish, given some of the artefacts we've seen from his time.
Yeah, I did look into it. So the tail numbers, you can see them, and you can see they're registered to these offshore companies in the Cayman Islands and British Virgin Islands. And that's, for me, where the trail went dead. But other people look at things like flight logs and company details and so on, and they're the ones who suggested that it might have been Pablo Escobar's. Whether it is or not, I have no idea, and I've not seen any hard evidence, but I think it's a really good story.
It's a really good story, isn't it? And it's going to make people want to come on board. Talk to us about its journey to Bristol.
Well, that was great. Along with, having my children and getting married, it was one of the funnest days of my life. We put it on a big lorry and it drove down the motorway. It got stuck on roundabouts and stuck under motorway bridges. And then we tried to lift it with the cranes and the crane sunk. It was just absolute calamity, but so much fun, total adventure. But it did get there and we plonked it on the containers and we lashed it down and it's been there ever since.
And Johnny, it's proving popular, is it?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it was born as a hobby, just a bit of fun because I kind of could and it was there. And now it's a little business which, rents out to people that want to stay on a plane, and the money that we get, we can improve it and preserve it. So it's nice, and a lot of people stay there, and it's got a really good story and good vibes around it.
Yeah, an interesting story indeed. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, Johnny. Johnny Palmer there, owner of the Boeing 727, potentially once owned by Pablo Escobar. That's all from the UK Tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8.